Level 1. The Civilian. Before everything. You are 22 years old and you have decided, not impulsively, you've been deciding for 3 years. Since the recruiter conversation that you almost didn't have. Since the night you spent reading about BUD/S on a laptop in a college dorm room while your roommate slept. Since the morning you realized that the life you were headed toward, the career, the apartment, the careful accumulation of comfort, felt like a door closing before you'd seen what was on the other side. You want to know what you're made of. That's the most honest version of it. The SEAL recruiting process begins with a PST, physical screening test, 500-meter swim, push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, mile-and-a-half run. Minimum scores get you in the door. Competitive scores get you a shot at a good training class. You train for 14 months before you take the PST. Not because you need 14 months, because you want to arrive at BUD/S having done everything you could possibly do in the time available. You want to know when it gets hard or such, and you know it will get hard, that the deficit is not preparation. That if you fail, it's because the thing itself was beyond you, not because you didn't prepare enough. You score in the top percentile. The recruiter shakes your hand. You ship to Coronado, California. The door you were afraid was closing opens. You have no idea what's behind it. Level 2. The Recruit Boot Camp. Navy boot camp is not BUD/S. You know this. Everyone who arrives at Great Lakes knowing they're going to BUD/S knows this. Boot camp is the institutional entry point. 8 weeks of learning to be a sailor, which is a different and more basic thing than learning to be a SEAL. You do it correctly. You do everything correctly. Not because boot camp is hard, relative to what's coming, it isn't, but because you understand that the habit of doing things correctly, regardless of difficulty, is the habit you're going to need when doing things correctly is the only thing between you and failure. You graduate. You receive your orders. Level 3. The Candidate. BUD/S Hell Week. Hell Week begins on a Sunday night. You don't sleep again until Friday. That sentence doesn't convey what it means. 5 days and 5 nights of continuous physical evolution. Running, swimming, paddling inflatable boats through surf, carrying logs, carrying boats on your heads, doing push-ups in the surf zone while the Pacific Ocean tries to remove your will to continue. You will cover approximately 200 miles of running and swimming. You will carry a 200-pound rubber boat on your head for hours at a time. You will be cold, the specific cold of wet clothing in a California winter that never fully goes away, and that your body eventually stops trying to fight because fighting it costs more than you have. The attrition is massive. You started BUD/S with 172 men in your class. By Wednesday of Hell Week, there are 61 left. By Friday, there are 43. You are one of the 43. Not because you are tougher than the men who quit. Some of them were physically stronger than you. Some of them were faster, better swimmers, more experienced athletes. What you discovered you had in the early hours of Monday morning when quitting first became a real option your body was presenting to your mind, was the specific ability to narrow your focus to the next task. Not Hell Week, not the next evolution, the next task. Paddle to the rock, get out, carry the boat, get back in, paddle back. One task, then the next one. By the time you finish Hell Week, the narrowing has become automatic. You will use it for the rest of your career. You graduate BUD/S Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3, SEAL qualification training. Total time from start to Trident, 2 years. You pin the Trident on your chest on a Tuesday morning. It is heavier than it looks. Level 4, the SEAL, Basic Qualified. You are 24 years old and you have the Trident. You report to your first team. SEAL Team 3, based in Coronado. You are the new guy, the FNG in the specific language of teams, and the status of new guy in a SEAL team is its own education. You know nothing. That's not false modesty. The Trident qualifies you to begin learning. The actual knowledge, or the operational knowledge, the tactical knowledge, the institutional knowledge that turns a qualified SEAL into a reliable operator, that comes from the experienced men around you, and it comes slowly, and it comes because you earn it by demonstrating that you're worth teaching. You listen more than you speak. You do every task you're given completely. You ask questions when questions are appropriate, and absorb answers when they're not. Your first deployment is to the Gulf. presence patrols, training partner forces, the unglamorous but essential work that most of what SEALs do actually consists of, as opposed to what the movies say it consists of. You do it well. You come home, you go back. Level 5. The Operator. Finding your edge. 3 deployments in and you've found your role. Every SEAL finds a specialty that fits the particular shape of their capabilities. Some are breachers, the men who open doors, literally, using explosives or rams or techniques that are more art than science. Some are communicators, some are medics, some are snipers. You are a sniper. It became clear in your second deployment, the patience for it, the specific stillness that good snipers have, the ability to be in a position for hours and remain completely alert rather than drifting into the comfortable numbness that long waits invite. You complete the Naval Special Warfare Sniper course. It is widely considered the most difficult sniper course in the world. The attrition rate is approximately 50%. You are in the half that finishes. Your first Overwatch is a 14-hour hide in a compound in Iraq. You are watching an intersection that intelligence suggests will be used by a high-value target's vehicle. You watch for 14 hours. The vehicle never comes. You egress without having fired a shot. This is most of what sniping actually is. The missions where you fire are a fraction. The missions where you watch and report and shape the intelligence picture are the majority. Both matter. Level 6. The Team Leader, the weight of command. You are 30 and you lead a platoon. 16 SEALs. You are responsible for their training, their readiness, their performance on deployment, and the decisions that put them in positions where their lives are at risk. The last responsibility is the one that changed you. It's different when the call you make is the call that puts your men in harm's way. When you were one of the men, harm's way was your problem. Now it's 16 people's problem, and you're the one who decided. You make good calls. Your record is clean. No men lost, missions accomplished, the quiet professional reputation that the teams prize above visible glory. But you replay the close calls. The operation in Afghanistan where the intelligence was wrong about the number of armed men in the compound. The exfil in Syria where the helicopter was 12 minutes late and 12 minutes felt like a different unit of time from any 12 minutes you'd previously experienced. You replay them not because you made wrong calls, but because you want to understand every decision completely. To know that what you did was the best available decision given the information at the time, not just a decision that happened to work out. There's a difference. You know the difference. Level 7. The Chief, the backbone of the teams. You are 35 and you are a Chief Petty Officer. The Chief is the institutional memory of a SEAL team. Officers rotate. They come up through the ranks, lead at various levels, transition to staff positions. Chiefs stay. A good chief has been in the teams for 15 years and carries knowledge that no career path produces except experience. You are that chief now. You mentor the new guys the way the chiefs mentored you. Not softly. Softness in this context is a disservice, a failure to prepare them for what operational reality actually requires. But honestly, you tell them what Bud/S doesn't teach. You tell them what deployment actually looks like versus what they imagined. You tell them how to sustain a career in the teams without destroying their body or their marriage or both. Your marriage is intact, barely, at points. Your wife has the specific resilience of a woman who married the teams, knowing what she was marrying and who has held it together through deployments and injuries and the general difficulty of being with a person who can't talk about most of what shapes them. You have 2 kids. They know you're a SEAL. Your son wants to be one. You tell him to finish college first. You mean it as advice. He hears it as a challenge. You are the same way. Level 8. The Commander. SEAL Team CO. You command a SEAL team. The commanding officer of a SEAL team is responsible for approximately 300 people. Operators, support staff, the full organizational ecosystem that makes the operational capability possible. You plan the training cycles, you set the culture. You are the public face of the team to the chain of command above and the institutional face to the men below. You've been in the teams for 18 years. The physical cost of 18 years in naval special warfare is real and cumulative. Your knees have been operated on twice. Your shoulders carry the specific damage of thousands of fast rope insertions and parachute landings. You manage it. You will manage it until you can't, and then you'll figure out the next thing. The operational tempo since 2001 has been extraordinary. A generation of SEALs who have deployed more times than any previous generation, who have seen more combat, who carry more accumulated operational stress than the institution fully knows how to address. You think about this as a commander. You think about what you owe the men who gave the most years of their lives to this. You don't have complete answers. You have the obligation to keep asking the question. Level 9. The Admiral, Special Operations Command. You are 51 and you wear stars. The path from SEAL team to flag officer is long and specific. Command tours, staff tours, joint assignments. The deliberate development of an officer who can operate at the strategic level of American national security, rather than the tactical level where the career began. You sit on committees that determine the future shape of Special Operations Forces. You testify before Congress, in open session about things that can be said publicly and in closed session about things that cannot. You brief the Secretary of Defense. You brief the National Security Council. The work at this level is policy and resources and the long-term institutional questions that tactical operators never think about, because tactical operators are correctly focused on the mission in front of them. You think about them now, where the force should be in 10 years. What threats are emerging that current capabilities aren't designed for? What the cost of the operational tempo has been on the force and how to build resilience without sacrificing readiness. You miss the teams, not the danger. You've made your peace with not being in danger. You miss the simplicity of it, the clarity of a mission with a defined objective and a team you trust completely, and the specific satisfaction of executing something well. Strategy has no such clarity. Strategy is permanent ambiguity, managed continuously, with consequences that take years to appear. You've learned to find meaning in it, most days. Level 10, the legend, the man BUD/S made. You are 60 years old and you are done. 4 decades. More deployments than you've counted. More countries than your passport officially reflects. A career that will be partially declassified 30 years from now and partially never. You live quietly. A house near the water. You could never be fully away from the water. You run every morning. Slower now, but still. You sleep well, which surprises people who know what you've seen. You sleep well because you made the calls you could defend and lived with the ones you couldn't change, and eventually understood that the two categories are different and require different kinds of work. The teams produce something in you that nothing else could have produced. Not toughness. Toughness is too simple a word for it. Something more like a tested knowledge of your own limits, a clarity about what you can and can't sustain. An understanding of what matters, earned through years of being in situations where what matters becomes very simple, very fast. Your son finished college. Then he went to BUD/S. He called you the night before Hell Week started. You told him the only thing that matters. Narrow it down. Next task. Just the next task. He made it through. You didn't cry when he called to tell you. You waited until after you hung up. Somewhere tonight, a 22-year-old is on a laptop. He's reading about BUD/S. His roommate is asleep. He's been reading for 3 hours and he should sleep, but he can't stop. He doesn't know about the 65-degree water. He doesn't know about Hell Week or the boats or the cold that never goes away. He doesn't know what it will make of him, what it will cost him, what it will build in him, what he will carry for the rest of his life from the years he's about to give to this. He closes the laptop. He sets his alarm for 5 a.m. He's going to run 6 miles before class. He's been doing it for 14 months. He's not going to stop now. The water is waiting for him. It always is, for the ones who show up anyway.